the stop on the coast of Hispania, and the Firestone. Previously, Alexander and Helena set sail from Massalia aboard the Alethea, driven by the dream of reaching Thule, the legendary island where Helena's mother used to say the gods danced in veils of light. The crossing through the Mediterranean brought the couple face to face with a brutal storm that tested the crew's courage and the love between them with that particular brutality of the sea, which cares nothing for intentions, only for capabilities. The Alethea survived not because she was stronger than the waves, but because the people on board were stronger than fear. After weathering the fury of the waters, they spotted the coast of Hispania and anchored there, finding shelter, rest, and the first allies of the road, people who were strangers and yet, in some way, none of them could precisely name, expected. In this new episode, we will discover together how the simple act of Helena lighting a fire and preparing a soup will turn strangers into brothers, because genuine hospitality does not ask whether the moment is convenient before acting. It simply acts. But there is something more in that fire than wood and spark. There is memory. There is the stone from Thule that years before, Helena held between her hands and young Alexander's to teach him the first lesson she would ever give him, that certain flames are not born by accident, but through the deliberate meeting of elements that had been waiting for one another. Alexander, sitting on the sand of Hispania while the soup bubbles, will travel back through time to that afternoon in Lysimachus's house, where a young woman with luminous eyes struck flint against steel and made a spark that did not merely light straw, but lit destiny. And when the improvised feast brings sailors and villagers together in a single circle of shared humanity, it will become clear that the greatest conquest of any journey is not the destination one reaches, but the alliances one sows along the way. The calm after the storm. The silence that came after the storm was not an absence of sound. It was the presence of something different, the specific quality of air after immense forces have spent themselves, when the whole world rests like an animal that has just shown what it is capable of. The sea, still unsettled from the night's turmoil, now reflected the first rays of dawn with that particular generosity of surfaces that had been churned and, upon recovering their stillness, returned the light with an intensity that permanently calm surfaces never achieve, as if the previous agitation had polished something that rest alone never could. The crew members, exhausted and wet with that dampness that seeps through layers of clothing and reaches the bones with an efficiency no dry cold could ever match, gazed at the golden line of the horizon emerging between scattered clouds. Every heart beat with that specific lightness of relief that only exists when its opposite had been real, when the danger was not imagined but present, and when survival was not guaranteed but earned through choices made in fractions of a second with no time for conscious deliberation. The storm had purified not only the decks of salt and foam, but something interior in each one of those who had spent the night awake, listening to the wood groan under pressure that could have been the last pressure the Alethea would ever bear. On the beach, that slowly revealed itself as the morning mist retreated with the gradualness of revelations that understand that the pace of disclosure is part of what is being disclosed. The white sand gleamed like salt, laid down with intention, material of the same family as the sea, but placed on solid ground, a border between two worlds that live in permanent and fertile tension. To the weary eyes of the sailors, it was a sign of firm land, the promise that the ground would not shift beneath their feet, that there would be a surface that did not sway, that the horizon would no longer be merely a line between two states of instability. And to you who follow this crossing, who enter with us this territory where fire holds memory and where the act of feeding transforms strangers into family, I leave a simple but essential request. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your comment sharing what you feel. Every gesture of yours is a flame that joins the others, strengthening the invisible current that unites hearts across time and across the mysteries that await revelation. In doing so, you do not merely support this work, you become part of this tapestry. The story continues, and it is your presence that keeps the fire alive. Helena, standing beside Alexander, made a request in a voice that carried something beyond practical need. The specific understanding of those who know that feeding is not merely satisfying biological hunger, but reaffirming that life deserves to be sustained with deliberate care after having been threatened by nature's indifference. Cook. For the men who had entrusted their lives to the sea and to them through the night just past. Alexander confirmed with firmness and tenderness the two qualities he had learned over time enough to share a life with Helena that seldom exclude one another when both are genuinely present. As the rowboats glided over the waves and brought them onto the sand, each grain beneath their feet was a blessing of familiar texture. Each breath of wind carried a reminder of life before the storm. And Helena was already thinking of the grains of crith, the lentils, and the dried salmon inherited from Alexander's family as the ingredients of a ritual of reconnection with the simplicity that the sea, in its fury, had temporarily suspended. While the crew raised steaks and cauldrons with the efficiency of bodies that have found a known task after a chaotic situation, and Alexander struck flint to kindle the fire with gestures that were at once technical and, for him, laden with a memory that the shores of Hispania were about to awaken, Helena was recalling a distant afternoon that was also this afternoon, because certain memories do not stay in the past. They live in the present of every gesture that echoes them. The fire that unites and nourishes. There are fires that warm the body, and there are fires that warm what lies beneath the body. That layer of being which the cold that truly matters reaches when everything else has failed. The fire Helena lit that morning was of the second kind. The fire, newborn from the meeting of flint and blade with that birth which is never guaranteed and which, precisely because of that, carries the quality of a repeated miracle when it does occur, crackled with that language of flames which every human culture in every age has interpreted as a communication of something that exceeds chemical combustion. Each snap announced not merely the presence of fire, but the presence of the moment as something deserving of complete attention, an invitation to stop thinking about what had passed or what was yet to come and simply be there, gathered around what burned. Alexander fed the flames with dry branches with the specific care of one who knows that excess kills a fire just as surely as absence does, that there is a right measure which neither fights nor abandons, but simply sustains. Helena blew gently, regulating the heat, and in that breath there was something of life given to the fire, of vitality transmitted, as though the oxygen she offered carried an intention that ordinary oxygen does not carry. From inside the small travel sacks came the ingredients with that quality belonging to objects that have journeyed and therefore carry places within themselves. Grains of crith, earth-colored lentils, and a piece of salted salmon, a treasure inherited from Alexander's parents, materials that had passed through other hands before reaching Helena's, that bore in their texture and their scent the record of choices made by generations who could never have known that their choices would still be having consequences in these hands at this fire on this beach. As she lowered the grains into the boiling water with the gesture of cooks who understand that cooking is transformation, that what enters the pot is not the same as what emerges from it, she cast into the broth not only nourishment, but memories of a distant home, of afternoons beside her mother learning secrets that only time and affection can transmit, because they cannot be learned any other way. The crew members, scattered across the sand with the disposition of bodies that have finally been given permission to stop after hours of tension, watched in a respectful silence that was at once admiration and something more. The specific recognition of men hardened by wind and salt in the presence of a gesture belonging to a world they had left behind when they set sail, a world of care and nourishment and feminine presence that life at sea so often suspends. Helena's presence among them made the moment more human with that quality of humanity which is never declared but always felt. and then figures emerged from among the trees of the nearby forest, villagers drawn by the smoke rising thin and clear against the morning sky. They wore simple hides and carried in their eyes the caution of those who know travelers when they see them, but also the curiosity of those who see in the outsider not a threat, but a possibility of exchange. They approached slowly, honoring the space with that respect which is not hostile distance, but the recognition that true approach must be consented to in order to be real. Helena, sensing their presence with that peripheral awareness of those who have learned to notice without needing to look directly, did not hesitate. She took out wooden bowls and invited the newcomers to taste the stew with that gesture of hospitality which does not calculate whether what will be offered will be enough, because it knows that generous insufficiency nourishes more than calculated sufficiency. There, in the simple exchange between soup and game, the villagers offering in return freshly hunted venison wrapped in aromatic leaves, an invisible bond was born, one that would have consequences none of those present could foresee, but that all of them would feel as the warmth of the fire becoming also the warmth of friendship. The improvised feast became a celebration of gratitude for being alive, for finding hospitality, for recognizing that even in unfamiliar lands, there are always hands ready to welcome those who arrive with legible intentions. Memories that surface with rest. There are moments in which the present is so complete that it opens space for the past to enter without violence, not as an intrusion, but as a guest who had been waiting outside and is finally recognized and received. After the last piece of venison was carefully laid on a board to be salted with that specific attentiveness of those who know that what is done now will determine what is available when the sea leaves no options. A serene silence settled over the cove. The sea, formerly fierce, moved with a gentleness that seemed deliberate, as if it had exhausted what it had to demonstrate through the night and was now simply present, with no intention of proving anything further. The crew members, fed and warm, sought a spot in the shade of the rocks or rested directly on the soft gleam of the beach with that particular surrender of bodies that have finally been given permission to release what they had been holding through hours of tension. Alexander sat down a little apart, not out of isolation, but out of that specific need which certain moments of fullness create, the need for a small distance that allows one to see the whole rather than merely being inside it. He watched Helena gathering the last bowls, her movements so light they resembled dance. Not the dance that has been rehearsed, but the kind that emerges when the body is in harmony with what it is doing, when action and intention coincide without friction. Her hair, lit by the rising sun striking at a specific angle that turned strands into temporary gold, looked like a wheat field in the wind, with that mobility of things that are light enough to respond to currents of air the body cannot feel. He smiled as he noticed how, even in circumstances so adverse, she maintained that complete presence which is not artificial serenity, but the result of someone who has learned to inhabit the moment as a home rather than a transit station. With eyes half closed in that specific state between wakefulness and dream that rest after prolonged tension produces, Alexander traveled in thought to a distant time, not as an escape from the present, but as a summoning of something the present had awakened. He recalled the day his father Aristotle had dragged him to the home of an old friend newly arrived from distant lands. He had not wanted to go. He had preferred to wander alone through the fields near the port with that preference of youth for solitude that had not yet discovered itself to be a form of isolation disguised as independence. But the promise of hearing stories about exotic creatures and mysterious stones had convinced him. He had not imagined that this invitation would be the threshold of a larger destiny. He had not imagined that invitations are never merely invitations, that they are frequently portals that appear to be simple openings in solid walls, but that lead to territories which permanently transform those who pass through them. When they arrived at Lysimachus's small estate, they were received by a scene he would never erase from memory. And certain scenes are not erased, not because the mind holds them through effort, but because they inscribe themselves at a level deeper than conscious memory, at the level where identity is shaped before any conscious deliberation can mediate the process. Helena, then young with luminous eyes that were at once the same and entirely different from the woman now cooking for sailors and villagers on the shores of Hispania, appeared in the doorway. For the young Alexander, her presence in that instant was like the recognition of something he had not yet seen, but had somehow been expecting. The unsettling experience of encountering for the first time something that feels like a return. The stone's glow and the birth of a bond. The spark Helena struck that afternoon in Lysimachus's house was not merely a spark. It was the first sign, not of fire, but that two people who did not know each other were, in some way that neither they nor anyone present could fully articulate, destined to know each other. The memory expanded within Alexander with that quality belonging to truly important recollections, not as a static image retrieved from an archive, but as an experience that becomes present once more, that has temperature and scent and the specific texture of the air of that moment. The sweet smell of herbs in the air, mingled with the faint aroma of toasted grains drifting from Lysimachus's kitchen. The soft warmth of the hearth in contrast with the coolness of the breeze passing through the half-open door. With that difference in temperature, the body registers as a tension between comfort and the world outside. Everything wrapped in amber light so serene that it transformed that simple house into a sanctuary of stories and futures. That specific quality of certain interiors that make those who enter feel that something significant could be said there without the weight of the significant frightening whoever says it. On the table rested a pale, smooth stone that discreetly reflected the sunlight coming through the window with that modesty of objects which possess real power and therefore have no need to display it. For Alexander, that object had a magnetism of its own, but it was the glow in Helena's eyes as she looked at it that made everything extraordinary. As if between the young woman and the stone, there existed a relationship that predated the visitors' arrival and that the visitors were being permitted to witness, not to fully understand. Tiphys suggested that his daughter light the fire. Helena took the stone with the familiarity of one who handles a well-known object, not with the caution of someone afraid of breaking it, but with the care of someone who respects what they are using. She struck it against the metal. A shower of sparks leapt forth, vivid and precise, setting the straw alight in a single instant. Calliope, startled, let out a cry. She was soon calmed by Helena's serene smile, which conveyed composure even in the face of others' astonishment. The specific composure of one who knows what she is doing because she learned from a source that goes beyond anything any manual could teach. Lysimachus explained in a voice filled with memories that were at once pride and gratitude that the stone was a gift from Thula, a fragment of their homeland used to awaken the flame in cold lands. To share that secret was to surrender part of one's own history, and in his gesture, there was the particular generosity of those who understand that legacies kept only for oneself die with those who keep them, but those that are shared multiply beyond any intention. When Alexander's turn came, Helena drew close. She placed her hand delicately over his, a touch that was at once instruction and something that entirely exceeded any instruction any words could have conveyed with the same precision. Together they held the flint, and she guided the striking motion with the patience of the good teacher who knows that the hand which guides cannot replace the hand which learns, only accompany it. The spark was born strong, illuminating for an instant their faces so close together with that fleeting light of sparks that last less than the blink of an eye, but which, when they happen, are the most present thing of all. It was in that second that something took hold in the young man's heart, not as a conscious decision, not as an articulated feeling, but as a recognition prior to any category the mind uses to organize experience. That young woman and he were part of the same pattern, and that pattern was only beginning to reveal its shape. Back in the present, seated on the beach while Helena cooked for sailors and villagers with the same naturalness with which she had once cooked for family on that distant afternoon, Alexander understood the continuity that ran through both scenes. The fire was the same. Not physically, but in intention, in quality of presence, in meaning. Helena had learned from the stone of Thula that certain flames are not born by accident, but through the deliberate meeting of elements that had been waiting for one another. And their entire life together had been, in some way, that meeting repeated in different forms. Two elements that, upon drawing close, produced a light that neither of them would have produced alone. Between the present and silent gratitude. Genuine gratitude has a specific quality. It is not merely a feeling one experiences, but a recognition that reorganizes what one sees. Those who are truly grateful see the same world with eyes that detect what was always there, but that ordinary distraction prevented from being registered. Alexander opened his eyes with the slowness of someone surfacing from a deep dive, not a violent breaking through, but a gradual ascent that respects the difference in pressure between where he had been and where he was arriving. The clarity of the morning enveloped the cove in an almost translucent brightness, and for a moment he simply watched the gentle ebb and flow of the waves with that pure observation that precedes any interpretation before the mind begins to catalog and categorize what the senses receive. The laughter of the village children, mingled with the sound of seagulls, created a melody that no one had composed yet that sounded as though someone had. That harmony which emerges when sufficiently different elements occupy the same space with the humility of not trying to dominate what the others produce. The memories receded with the gentleness of memories that know they have served their purpose and that the present needs the space back. Near the fire, Helena was talking with a woman from the village, exchanging gestures about how to season the venison before hanging it to cure. A conversation that required no common language because hands have a language of their own, because the gesture of showing how something is done is universal in a way that words rarely achieve. The sailors, energized with that renewed animation of those who have found a concrete task after hours of tense waiting, were helping their hosts assemble improvised drying racks, laughing when the stubborn wind threatened to carry off the leaves used to wrap the game. That specific laughter of minor setbacks that carry no serious consequences and which for that very reason reveal that the tension has passed sufficiently for lightness to return. The scene had the quality of the sacred not through any formal ritual, but because the sacred is precisely this. People from different worlds joined by need and generosity, without hierarchy, only hands cooperating in grateful silence. Alexander walked toward them, feeling beneath his feet the mixture of sand and shells, with that texture that is at once soft and uneven, that does not allow the foot to settle completely, and which for that reason keeps the body light and attentive. He paused for a moment to observe Helena integrated into that circle of sharing, and confirmed what he had understood during the memories. She was not merely cooking, she was sowing trust. Every gesture of hers communicated that those who had arrived were not a threat, not competitors for resources, not passengers who would pass through without leaving anything of themselves. They were people who recognized the value of what had been offered and who gave back with the only currency that holds regardless of exchange rate: genuine presence. As he drew near the fire, Alexander caught the fragrance of the broth mingling with the rustic aroma of freshly seasoned meat in that combination that is simultaneously familiar and new. Familiar because it belonged to the category of sense the body recognizes as nourishment. New because each specific combination of ingredients and context creates something unrepeatable. One of the village elders approached, carrying a small jug of dark wine as a sign of friendship. And in that wine, there was the intense flavor of the earth, of the soil of that specific place, of climatic conditions and of years that no other wine would carry because no other wine had been born in exactly that spot. Alexander accepted it, recognizing in each sip the certainty that true bonds can be born from the most unexpected circumstances, that the providence which had led them through the storm to that beach had also prepared those hosts to receive them, and that coincidences of such perfection are not accidental, but signs that the path which appears to be merely a path is always at the same time a destination. The Feast of Union. There are celebrations that require an altar, a ceremony, a priest, and there are those that are born spontaneously when the right conditions converge, that are sacred precisely because no one planned for them to be sacred, because the sacredness arrived before any conscious intention could invite it. The beach transformed itself into an open-air hall with the naturalness of transformations that require no intervention, because they emerge from what is already present, from the disposition of the people, the fire, the food, the moment that had arrived for all of it to converge. The cauldrons, now lukewarm, served only as reminders of the shared stew. The venison hung in the sun, salted and prepared to withstand the duration of the journey that would resume when the sun of this morning was only memory. Men and women, sailors and villagers sat together as if no borders existed between land and sea, because in that specific instant none did, because the borders that separate people are constructions that enough shared humanity temporarily dissolves, revealing what existed before them. The common condition of being alive in a world that is at once generous and dangerous, and which requires that we lean on one another in order to cross it. Helena smiled as she saw that her soup, simple at its core, composed of ingredients that any pragmatic eye would assess as modest, had opened doors to something that no more sophisticated ingredient could have opened, because what true doors need in order to open is not sophistication, but sincerity. The gesture of sharing a warm bowl had given rise to laughter, stories, and alliances with that natural progression of things that happens when someone offers something genuinely without calculating the return. Village children ran across the sand, imitating the sailors at their oars, while crew members taught them sea shanties with a clapping rhythm. And in that scene was the image of what humanity can be when it is not defending territory. Children learning, adults teaching, borders becoming permeable without anyone needing to declare that this is happening. Alexander, standing on an elevated rock that offered a slightly broader perspective, watched with the attentiveness of a captain who never ceases to be on duty, but who here was on duty in service of something different from navigation, in service of the understanding that a ship does not sail on sails and oars alone, but on the invisible force of mutual trust. Seeing his crew laugh with the villagers with that laughter which has no calculation in it, which is not managing impressions, which is simply a genuine response to something genuinely funny or pleasant, he understood that that morning would be remembered not as a pause in the journey, but as an essential part of it, a silent victory, more valuable than any conquest in battle, because conquests in battle create resistance, but conquests of the heart create allies. One of the older villagers took the floor, raising a cup of wine and speaking a few phrases in his own tongue. Although the words were unknown to most, the universal gesture of a toast was immediately understood, because there are gestures that transcend languages, because they were learned before any language, that belong to the oldest grammar of humanity. The sailors raised their makeshift cups. The dark wine passed from hand to hand, uniting them in a circle of gratitude. And in that circle there was something that was at once a celebration of what had been lived and a preparation for what was to come, as if the shared cup sealed not only a present alliance, but a readiness for the road ahead, whatever form it might take. The fire, which since early morning had been warming them all, danced in the wind with that life of its own that open-air fires possess, casting sparks toward the sky like small ascending stars, returning to the cosmos in luminous fragments something of what it had received in wood and intention. Renewed strength for the journey. There is a renewal that comes from the rest of the body, And there is that other kind, rarer and more lasting, that comes from the rest of the soul, when it finds, for a few hours, exactly the kind of human presence it needed in order to remember why the effort is worth it. As the afternoon stretched over the beach, an air of renewal enveloped every man and woman present, with that quality of certain late afternoons that is not merely pleasant temperature, but something atmospheric that corresponds to an inner state of contentment. The sailors, who hours before had arrived exhausted with that specific exhaustion of those who have overcome not only physical effort but also fear, wore smiles that required no declared cause. The kind of smile that emerges when the entire body agrees that the present moment is good without needing to articulate why. It was as if the storm had carried off with it the weight of despair along with the foam that had covered the decks, as if the violence of the waves had, paradoxically, swept away not only what was on the surface, but what lay beneath it, the accumulated layer of anxiety that the crossing had deposited. Helena, as she gathered the utensils with the movement of someone completing one phase and clearing space for the next, perceived that her simple meal had transformed the destiny of that day in ways that no strategic plan could have produced. What had been conceived as a gesture of care, feeding those who were exhausted, had become the foundation of a bridge between worlds. She understood, with that clarity of perceptions that arrive when an action has been completed and there is space to see what it produced, that her presence aboard the Alethea was not merely that of Alexander's wife, but as guardian of the bond between heart and path, the person who reminded everyone that the most important journeys are not only geographical, that the most significant destinations are not found on any map. Alexander gathered part of the crew to watch the venison being carefully treated with salt and spoke to them not as a distant commander, but as a fellow traveler who had learned something that morning that needed to be said aloud in order to become completely real. He highlighted the importance of every gesture of that day, from the fire lit by Helena to the wine shared with strangers who had become allies. He said that trust is neither bought nor demanded. It is born in moments like that one, when lives meet around a common fire and discover that they share more than any border of language or origin could suggest. A young hunter from the village approached Alexander and, with a smile that needed no translation, offered him a small bronze knife as a gift of friendship. Alexander received it with reverence, recognizing in that gesture the proof that the greatest alliances require no formal treaties, only symbols born from the heart, which for that very reason are more binding than any document any authority could sign. When the first stars began to appear with that timidity of stars that emerge before it is truly night, as if asking permission to exist in a sky that still belonged to the day, the group gathered once more around the fire, not to eat, but simply to remain. The shared silence that settled said more than 1,000 words, precisely because it had no need of words, because they had arrived at that point of intimacy between people who no longer require verbal filling of space to confirm that the connection exists. It was the silence of those who knew that from that point forward, even on the open sea, they would never be completely alone, that there was an invisible thread binding them to that land and to those people, and that this thread, woven from gratitude and human warmth, would be the invisible sail that pushed them forward across the seas yet to come. The farewell and the calling of the sea. There are farewells that are only physical separations, and there are those that are simultaneously farewells and continuations, when those who leave carry with them what remains, and those who remain continue through those who leave. The following morning, the beach awakened wrapped in soft mist with that quality of mists that do not obscure but veil, that render outlines less defined without erasing presence, as if the world were being seen through a semi-transparent material that softens angles and requires the gaze to be more careful, more attentive to what is being shown with delicacy rather than with brutal clarity. The villagers were already gathered, bringing with them small gifts with that specific generosity of those who offer what they have without calculating what will be missing afterward. Dried fruits, rustic bread, talismans of carved wood that were at once practical objects and bearers of the protective intention of those who had made them. Helena received each offering with a reverence that was not protocol, but genuine recognition that what was being given exceeded the physical objects. It was care-made material, presence transmitted through the tangible. Alexander organized the crew to load the rowboats with that efficiency, which is not haste but clarity of purpose. Every movement having a function, nothing wasted, everything serving what was to come. The venison cured with salt was stowed alongside the provisions with the respect given to resources that could make a difference when the sea leaves no options. The sailors worked with a renewed vigor that was visible not only in their speed, but in the quality of attention with which they executed each task, as if the previous morning had returned to them something the crossing had worn away, some certainty about why the effort is worth it that exhaustion had called into question. One of the oldest villagers approached Alexander, taking hold of his arm with a firmness that was at once a physical gesture and a communication that exceeded the physical. His eyes, marked by time with the specific marks of one who has spent decades observing the sea without being swallowed by it, which requires both respect and skill, conveyed a wisdom that needed no shared vocabulary to cross the border between two languages that did not know each other. He murmured words in his own tongue with an intensity suggesting that what was being said had been carefully chosen, that it was the most important thing to say, not the easiest. Alexander bowed his head, receiving whatever it was, blessing or warning, or that category which includes both, because certain knowledge is at once protection and alert, offered by those who understand that preparing someone for what is to come is a superior form of care to sparing that person from knowing. Helena, beside the women of the village, exchanged long embraces with that quality of embraces between women who have shared enough time together to create a recognition that needs no long history to sustain it. One of them placed over her shoulders a simple cloak of raw linen, and in that gift, there was the specific logic of gifts that are exactly what the person receiving them needs, not what the person giving them has in abundance. In that instant, Helena felt herself part of something larger, a network of women who, in different lands, shared the same instinct to care, to welcome, and to keep the flame alive amid the vastness of a world that so often seems indifferent to individual flames. When the rowboats were pushed back into the sea at that specific moment when the weight of the boat still belongs to the land and will soon belong to the sea, the villagers remained on the beach, waving. The crew looked back, etching into memory each face, each gesture, knowing that this was not a definitive goodbye, but a see you soon inscribed in the tides, because the sea is made of returns, and every port visited leaves invisible marks upon the soul. Reflections on the invisible force. The sea has two ways of teaching. One is through the storm, brutal, immediate, impossible to ignore. The other is through the calm that follows the storm, silent, gradual, and for that reason, more lasting, because what silence teaches cannot be unlearned at the first contrary wind. The Alethea moved forward over the waves with that specific rhythm of sailing in fair conditions, not a struggle against hostile elements, but a dialogue with cooperative ones, the sensation of being carried rather than forcing a passage. Alexander remained at the prow, looking back with that quality of gaze that is not hesitation about pressing on, but gratitude for what was left behind. The image of the Hispanian beach, and the figures still waving in the distance that the eye could barely distinguish anymore, but which memory saw with a clarity that physical distance could not reach. He felt that that land had given them not only food and rest, but testimony of humanity. Proof that the world still holds places where strangers are received not as a threat to be managed, but as an opportunity for encounter to be cultivated. Helena drew near, wrapped in the linen cloak received from the village women, with that way of wearing a gift that reveals it is being worn because it is cherished, not because etiquette requires it. Her eyes reflected the vastness of the sea, but also the memory of the shared fire, with that specific combination belonging to those who are completely in the present without having entirely left the recent past, who carry well what they have lived while continuing forward. "Do you see, Alexander?" she said softly, with that voice which had the quality of observations that need not be spoken aloud because the listener has already sensed them, but which gain something by being spoken because the act of saying crystallizes what had only been felt. "The sea may separate us from many, but generosity unites us like a bridge." Her words fell upon him like drops of dew that arrive without announcing themselves. They simply appear, cool and precise, and the contact is at once surprise and inevitability. Alexander reflected on the storm with that distance only sufficient time permits, a distance that does not diminish what was lived, but opens space to see it as part of something larger than the horror of the moment. The sea, with its nocturnal fury, could have been the end, and yet it was precisely that challenge which had led them to the beach, where destiny had held in store a sharing and a friendship they would never have found sailing calm waters on a different route. He perceived that life, like the ocean, alternates between storms and calms, but always holds a hidden purpose that only temporal distance reveals, that adversity is frequently a silent master, guiding toward the learning that convenience would never offer, because convenience has no interest in our becoming more than we are. When night began to announce itself with that gradual darkening that invites withdrawal before demanding it, Alexander gathered the crew. Beneath the sky, in which the first stars shone with that light which is at once faint and absolutely steady, present regardless of whether it is noticed, he spoke to them with the voice of one who had learned something that needed to be transmitted in order to become completely real. The sea tests us with fury, but it also offers us brothers in distant lands. We are not merely navigators. We are bearers of stories and of bonds that make us stronger. The respectful silence that followed was not empty, but full of presence. That specific silence that descends when what has been said was said at the right moment in the right way, and which for that very reason requires no response, because the response is already in the silence itself. The closing and the calling of the tides. There are endings that are merely stops, and there are those that are beginnings under another name, that close what has been completed in order to free space for what has not yet begun to reveal its shape. Night fell softly over the Alethea, sailing beneath a starlit sky that was not merely sky, but a map written in a language that only those who had learned to read it recognized as a map. The constellations in their specific positions on that night, of that era, of that place in the world, a configuration that would never repeat itself in exactly that way, because time advances and positions shift with a precision that astronomers catalog, but that navigators simply use as a compass. The sails, filled by the wind, seemed to hold the breath of the villagers who had bid them farewell with that quality of wind that has passed through people before reaching the ship, carrying something intangible but real. A blessing transmitted through the air as warmth is transmitted through touch. Helena, reclining beside the mast with that specific posture of one who has found the right angle between rest and wakefulness, kept her gaze fixed on the constellations with that attention that does not seek information but simply receives what is being offered. To her, each star was a sign of continuity, that the skies were the same in every corner of the earth, that Tiphys had seen these same constellations before telling her of Thule, that between that mother and this daughter there ran an unbroken line that not even death had completely severed, because what had been passed on lived on in Helena and continued advancing in the direction of what had been described. The linen cloak on her shoulders was not merely fabric. It was the memory of women on solid ground who had understood, without being told, that she needed something to warm her on the cold nights of the open sea, and the anticipatory care of those who do not know one another is one of the purest forms of humanity. Alexander walked the deck in slow steps, with that walk of those who are at once present in physical space and in an interior space of reflection, noticing that, even amid the night's work, there was on the sailors' faces an uncommon serenity that was not the serenity of exhaustion, which simply lacks the energy for tension, but the serenity of those who have found an additional reason to press on. The calls of command had given way to a silent harmony in which every gesture flowed naturally, as if the entire ship had learned to breathe in unison during that morning spent ashore, as if the shared rhythm of the feast had left a cadence that now expressed itself in the collective work. Standing at the prow, he raised his eyes and let the wind envelop him with that specific openness of one who is not trying to protect himself from what the world offers, but to receive it completely. The crew, lying in hammocks or leaning against the rails with the disposition of those who rest without having completely abandoned their watch, because the sea demands that one never completely abandons one's watch, looked up at the starlit sky. Some whispered prayers in languages that the sea had carried from different lands. Others simply contemplated with that active contemplation which is not passivity, but the fullest attention to what is present. It was as if all of them perceived, even without saying so, that each star reflected a promise, that just as the storm had yielded to the dawn, new ports would also appear when weariness was greatest, that the world which had tested them with fury would also offer with generosity if they continued to advance with genuine intention. And so, between the silence of the sea and the song of the stars, the Alethea pressed on. The village fire no longer glimmered in the distance, but it burned within the depths of every heart on board with that flame Helena had learned on that afternoon in Lysimachus's house to kindle not only in straw, but in people. The storm had transformed itself into a portal to a new beginning, and in the silent certainty that every journey is shaped not only by the waves, but also by the hands that reach out on land, Alexander and Helena smiled. They knew that the sea is vast, but friendship and gratitude are vaster still, eternal as the sky that guided them, unchanging as the stars that, regardless of whatever happened beneath them, would continue to exist, continue to point the way for those who learned to read them. Discover in our next episode. The Pillars of Hercules draw near, and with them, the boundary between the known sea and the ocean, the ancients called endless. The columns raised by Hercules were not merely geographic markers. They were warnings, declarations of limit, an inscription in stone of the belief that beyond them lay nothing mortals were meant to seek. Alexander and Helena are about to cross precisely what was built not to be crossed, and in doing so, they will complete the first act of a series of threshold crossings that the entire journey will demand, each more difficult and more revealing than the last. What awaits on the other side is not just the Atlantic. It is a world where the rules of the Mediterranean no longer apply, where the legends they have heard since childhood begin to take on possible coordinates, where Tiphys's story of veils of light dancing across the sky of a northern island begins to feel not only possible, but inevitable for those who have had the courage to come this far.